Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another edition of SuperCoach Edge, and of course another entry for Damo's Team Talk coming out of round 19. And let's not stuff around, of course. Let's jump straight into things, check out how we went for the week. And of course, if you're tuning in for the first time, feel free to hit that like button, give us a sub, all that sort of stuff. We do appreciate the support. However you can give it, even if you're just tuning in via podcast or via YouTube here. And as you can see here, if you are tuning in to YouTube, I ended up scoring a 2,370 for the week. Let me just zoom that in a little bit more if it works. And in terms of my rank, I'm a little bit slightly disappointed with the score, but there's a little bit of context to this, and it's due to one of my key, players being missing and being forced to play a certain player that got concussed for a very, very low score. But in terms of rank, ended up sliding back 23 spots, which was less than what I thought it would be. So I'll take that as a win. So season rank is now 3,047th overall. Of course, we are getting ever so close to the end of the, SuperCoach season itself, the home and away season. We are going into the last week of the home and away season, especially for those teams. It's most poignant that are, in head-to-head leagues and cash leagues, bragging right leagues, all that sort of stuff that are gunning for a final spot, top four, even the Iron Throne, even the top spot of the league. So it is heating up, of course, but hopefully it did work in your favour for the round just gone. Let's have a look at our team and how we went line by line, really. So as you can see here, we'll start with defence as we always do. Harry Sheasel, 138, looked really, really good against my mob. And as you can see, if you're tuning in via YouTube, of course, I've just come from the game. You got us sweating north, I will admit that. And we weren't in the best shape again, which is a little bit disappointing. We got the win, though. That's the main thing. But it's put the heebie-jeebies up, it's that for sure. But it was good to see Harry Sheasel live, just doing his thing. Scored a 138 was absolutely incredible. So good to see that for us owners. Nicky Dacos, 106. He had a very, very ordinary game again. He's just been off his game. I know he turned up, but not the sort of Nicky Dacos type game that we used to, where he's silky smooth, he hits up, passes where, any ordinary footballer can't really. So, and it wasn't really due to the Finn McGuinness tag, because Finn McGuinness was, strangely enough, he was the starting sub. So, as we know with the result with the Pies, I shouldn't laugh, of course, but they were absolutely outplayed by the Hawks. And Nicky Dacos was good enough to turn up, 106, so we'll take that anyway. Luke Ryan, 99. Again, he's a bit of a roller coaster nowadays. Not the sort of player that we're used to seeing early days when he was punching out those 130 plus games just for taking the field, really. And it's been since really the bye. After their bye, he scored 79, 93, 116, 99, 98, and a 99. So really disappointing. I'll give it to him. He's consistently, falling short of the 100 mark week on week for the past 6 weeks. But yeah, it's kind of, we have to make do with what it is at the moment. Like, strangely enough, his actual ownership has actually gone up from round 14, when he's had this sort of poor run of games. His ownership's gone up from 35.9% to now 39%, despite these poor games. I guess people are jumping on him because he is cheap, 546.8k. At his highest price point, he was 686.7 back in round 10. So yeah, fair to say that he's dropped a fair bit of coin, and makes a bit of sense there in that context as to why people are jumping on, but I'd probably look elsewhere, really, if you are a non-owner. Nicky Martin, 90, not the plug-a-locker game that we saw in the previous week when he kicked the 4 goals. Still punched out a 90. Was on track for around about 115, 120 at one stage, and really slowed up, much like the Dons did in the game as a whole. But yeah, he was everywhere early and just kind of petered out more than anything. Wangani Miller, 81. A bit of a disappointing game for him. Similar game to Martin, really. He started pretty well, was everywhere, and just ran out of gas. Another game below 100. Which is the 4th out of his past 5 games where he scored a 90, 92, 111, 98, and then the 81 against West Coast. So a little bit disappointing there, considering it is well below his season average now of 100.2. Dan Houston, Slightly disappointing considering that Farrell was out, so it meant that the monopoly on kick-ins was again gifted to Houston. Only scored that 96. Was hoping for about a 115 plus type game. Just wasn't to be really, especially against, an easy matchup in Richmond. But yeah, again, he's another player that's been out of form. His past 4 weeks look as such: 59, 76, 114, and a 96. But we'll make do. Hopefully Farrell, and you don't want to wish injury on anyone, but hopefully he's out for another week or so. And Houston can capitalise on it, albeit against my mob in Carlton this coming Friday night, which I don't really want to see. But hopefully he scores well and Port don't get the win. Next up we have in the midfield, well, firstly on the bench in defence, Will Dawson. He's back in the VFL but not getting games for North as yet. Hopefully we don't have to call upon him, considering he's not playing. But yeah, him alongside Zach Reid for the Dons, who I think is pretty much out for the season now. It says here that he's got a pectoral issue and he's expected to be available for finals if the Dons make it, of course, but it's a non-issue here for SuperCoach terms. For the midfield, Bontempelli 122. Now, he was my second option for captaincy. I was scared of Atkins potentially doing a bit of a run with role on Bont. Turns out that Atkins was a bit of a late out leading into the game. Was a very, very scrappy game, just very muddy, wet weather footy, that type of stuff. And Bont, to his credit, scored that 122, albeit my first option was Zach Butters. It looked as though, and I really, really hate this sort of stuff because it looks as though when there's a game where, a player should be having points handed to him on a silver platter due to matchup, because obviously the Tigers were giving up bulk points to opposition mids. And then also the cherry on top was Jack Graham, Richmond's tagger, being ruled out through injury. So I'm like, okay, here we go. Butters, he's going to have an incredible game. It's the roll out the red carpet for him to score well. Scored an 89. Part of that reason was Hinkley, for some stupid reason, I don't know what it is. Up until I reckon about three-quarter time, he's averaging his time on ground was around about 68%, which was among the lowest of all Port players. And I know there was the other week where Butters and Hinkley had a bit of a heated argument on the sidelines. Hopefully it's not off the back of that, because if it is Hinkley, you've cost me points, mate, and pull your head in if that's the case. But yeah, it was just very, very strange to see. I don't know what the issue was. Didn't have niggle, none of that sort of stuff. But yeah, it's just frustrating. It's 2 games back to back where, I had last week the captaincy on Merritt, and he scored the 82. And this week, Butters 89. So really does hurt when you have those back to back bad captaincy scores, because it does really give you a bit of a kick in the, a dents your score really, more than anything, and your prospects, and climb up the ranks and head-to-head games and all that sort of stuff. But Zach Merritt was my vice captain, 108, playing first up. Opted, it hasn't triggered the automatic lock-in VC score of the 120 plus, which he obviously didn't reach, so opted for Butters. And I was happy enough with that because I thought Butters, quite easily should eclipse that, but just wasn't to be. Connor Rosie 113, really pretty much a best on ground performance by him. Copped a bit of a knock to the hip, I think it was, or sort of lower back, upper glute area. Looked like it was a bit of a corky. They spoke to Rosie post game and he put our fears to bed by saying that he should be fine for next week, and was just simply a precautionary way to end the game on the bench, just because the game was done and dusted. Next to him is Tom Green, 117. Came out of the blocks and slowed up as well, because he was looking like he was in for a massive score. Wasn't to be, but 117 will take every single day of the week for Tom Green. As we know, he is a bit of a roller coaster. Next up, we have Sarong. Now, Sarong absolutely killed it. Incredible game by him, 140. And it's the sort of score that we were hoping to see against the Tigers the other week when we put the captaincy on him. So we haven't had a really good... Actually, that's now nearly 4 weeks where we've had really bad captaincy scores. Richmond, he had the 84. Merritt last week, the 80, whatever it was. And then Butters, the 89. So I've had really 3 back-to-back-to-back bad captaincy scores. So that's even more frustrating. I've just reminded myself there. But Sarong back in form. That 140 score was the first score... in the 140s that he's had since round 9 against Sydney, where he scored that 150. And it's actually the 4th ton that he's had since round 10. So, it's been a little while between drinks. Scored that 121 back in round 15 against the Gold Coast. But, yeah, we're hoping for that sort of game. I was actually surprised. I thought Neil Bullen was going to put a really hard tag on him. Don't know what the case was there because I was obviously at the Carlton North Melbourne game, but from what I can see, it doesn't look as though he's being tagged at all. Him and Brayshaw had a bit of a day out. Now, mind you, Sarong ended up finishing with 36 disposals, 4 marks, 5 tackles, 2 frees for, 1 against, and 1 goal. So an incredible all-round performance there by Sarong. Now, Sammy Walsh, 94, he was in the wars, and I'm hoping that he's not too sore to take his spot against Port Adelaide this coming Friday night, because it is a 5-day turnaround for Carlton, which doesn't bode well. And again, just puts into question the AFL fixture. What the bloody hell are you doing? Because it just does throw off, I guess the equalisation side of things is just absolutely ridiculous. But Walshy was copping knocks. He went off a couple of times and was holding his lower back, which does concern me, obviously, because of his back issues that he has had. Hopefully it was just a corky or something, and it's not an ongoing issue that is going to linger, because we don't want that, obviously, on the cusp of SuperCoach finals. But scored a 94, still to his credit. We'll take that. McKercher also scored a 94. He looked really good up until it was funny to see, and a really, I guess, credit to McKercher in his first year. He was actually getting tagged, believe it or not, by Chin Cotter. I think it was after halftime I noticed he was playing on him and quelled him. I think he was in line for around about a score of about 110 he was on track for, looking at his scoring from half-time and sort of extrapolating that out. So not too bad considering that he was being tagged. 94, we'll take that every single day of the week from McKercher. On the bench, had Dowling as my emergency with 83. Revel alongside him on 8. Of course, he was the sub again for the second week in a row. Unfortunate for him. And hopefully owners out there didn't need to rely upon him. And Rawlinson, obviously, as well as that non-playing player for West Coast, just sitting there in case I needed to use him, which I didn't, thankfully. For the Rucks, Gawn was obviously a touch and go for potentially making his return on the weekend. Wasn't to be, probably no surprise there considering that Melbourne were playing away against Freo. I think we can expect to see him back this week, knock on wood that we do, because it will virtually give me almost a fully strength team anyway, without any rookies on field. Albeit, if you want to count McKercher, but I'm not going to count him as a rookie because he was my 23rd man. Now, Rankin's obviously still on the bench as well, out for another 2 weeks. So we'll be coming back a week into the finals for SuperCoach. So we'll be glad to have him back. But yeah, we're just sort of making sure that our team doesn't fall apart. And speaking of which as well, I'll skip across Tim English for the time being, but just to segue into team falling apart. Nathan Kruger, so he was my player that I've used to cover for Gawn. I did have the option there as well, and we obviously all know for anyone that watched the game, but if you don't know, Kruger was subbed out on 24 early into the second quarter, or potentially late in the first even. Might have been in the first quarter because he copped a hit across the jaw from like the head of an opponent. Might have been Newcomb, who's as hard as a cat's head as we know. Was subbed out, and at that stage as well, the game was turning weather-wise, and it was a completely wet game, and it was no surprise. As soon as he went off, I was like, even if he isn't concussed, they're going to use this as an opportunity to sub at all. And given Kruger copped a hit and has had injury worries across the journey, I'm like, they're going to sub him here. And they ended up doing it. Subbed on 24. 24 was the lowest score that I had for the week to cover for Gawn. Now, I had the option as well. Leading into this game, Kruger was suffering from gastro, apparently. And I was like, it's probably, not the best preparation for coming into this game. So I was very close to just playing Luke Jackson in my rucks to cover for Gawn, and then fielding Richards. Rankin's on the bench up forward, so obviously I can't use another player. And if I was to do that with Richards and play him instead of Kruger, it would have given me an extra, 28 points. So much for muchness, really, but still does frustrate me, really, because it's something that I probably should have done. But again, it just comes down to the bad luck of SuperCoach. You can't control injuries and all that sort of stuff. Who gets subbed on, subbed off, and yeah, is what it is. Now, going back to Tim English, 139, he was up there as well in terms of my captaincy choices. Now, the shit thing is, again, we're going to blame the AFL here for their dumbass fixturing. They fixtured the Bulldogs-Geelong game the exact same time as the Port-Richmond game. So it meant that I wasn't able to, and initially I would have loved to have gone for VC on either Bont or Butters and the captaincy on the other one. English was playing up against, of course, Sam de Koning, who has been giving up bulk points to opposition rucks in recent weeks. So really no surprise there to see English go bananas. And I think it was actually the first game that English has won the hitouts all year. I think I heard a stat the other day that he's been beaten in the hitouts every single game for the year, apart from, obviously, against Sam de Koning. And he was always going to be in for a decent game, winning the hitouts, getting hitouts to advantage, all that sort of stuff. So scored the 139. Would have been a nice sort of VC C option as well for those people that were looking at him. Flanders, now moving to the forwards, of course, Flanders 128, just continuing his ton run. He is the most consistent player, hands down, for the season. Hasn't dropped below a ton, knock on wood that he doesn't, for all season, really. So he's been absolutely incredible, 128. Caldwell, 100, and it's been very, I guess, hit and miss, or what's the term for it? Probably we've been scared more than anything. Like the bejesus have been scared out of us because there's obviously been concussions with obviously Kruger that I've got. There's those that have Jordan Dawson. He's out concussed, going to be missing next week like Kruger. And then obviously as well Nankervis, who I think was subbed off, and they have confirmed that it was due to concussion. It wasn't due to a tactical move as it was with Caldwell. So Caldwell copped a head knock, went off, and there was I think it was 10 minutes of the game to go or something, 15 minutes maybe. And because the HIA or the concussion assessment is a mandatory minimum of 20 minutes off ground for assessment, they figured that we might as well just hold him off because they have to assess him for a concussion. Thankfully, he passed the concussion test, and it does mean that he is going to be able to play next round in round 20. So we are thanking the SuperCoach gods for sparing us a little bit of mercy in this case here. Isaac Heaney, 72, bit of a down game for him, but he's probably due one. He's been one of the more consistent players across the season, as we know. So he's owned by 62.6% of the competition. So it affects you, it affects everyone, really, that isn't go shipping at this time of the year and just giving up on their team. Dane Zorko, 129. He was consistent across the entire day. Really, really good. I think he was among the top scorers for Brisbane, if not the top scorer. So, yeah, good to see him. He hasn't scored this high since round 14 against the Saints, but he scored the 141. Since then, he's had scores of 104, 115, 84, 93, and that 129, obviously. Today, as I record this on Sunday, the 21st of July. Alongside him, Luke Jackson, and another scare again. So he actually ended the game on the bench with ice on his knee. Now, what they've come out and said, Freo, is that it was precautionary because the game was in the bag. And again, this gives me a little bit of the heebie-jeebies because the same thing happened with Gawn when they had the game in the bag against West Coast, and they'd kept him off ground because, the win was assured. And then obviously we know what happened with Gawn. Hopefully there isn't anything untoward with Jackson because we can't afford to miss any more players, especially in the forward line. With the way that we've set things up here for our team, because as you can see here, we've got one trade left. We want to hold this trade for as long as we can, really. And, if we had Jackson out, it does mean that we're going to have to go for another forward. And there aren't really any other forwards that I'd be confident in having, considering I've already got Rankin on my bench, outside of maybe more. That's virtually it. So, we don't want to be losing any more players. If that was the case, I'd probably just play Dowling up forward and potentially trade Jackson for potentially another midfielder or something. Who knows? But hopefully we don't have to do that. So another sort of near miss. Might sort of call it the Neo effect, the Matrix effect, where we're just dodging bullets here, left, right, and centre. But some haven't been as fortunate, of course. Rounding things out, of course, we have Charlie Curnow, 106. He back in form, incredible. Took a little while to get going, admittedly. Scored the 4 goals, 2 and 15 disposals, 9 marks, 1 tackle and 4 frees, 4. Good to see. Back in form. Back-to-back scores now of 89 and 106 after those down scores of 54 and 33. So super happy with that. Good to see, especially considering he's a relative pod in 16.7% of teams compared to those out there that probably have like a Moore or someone else in their forward line. So, happy with that, of course. Rankin, as I said, he's out warming the bench for another 2 weeks and desperately need him back, that's for sure. And then, obviously, as I said, Joe Richards with the 52 could have been an extra 28 points on top of Kruger if I played him, but is what it is, of course. So that is how we fared for this round. Let's have a quick look before. So we're not going to try and use this trade if we can help it, but looking ahead to round 20. And we have Carlton up against Port Adelaide. So looking at the VC and the C options here, obviously, as well. What we're going to be looking at is potentially Butters up against my mob. I do think Chincotta will go to him, though, over Rosie. Especially if Rosie's a little bit underdone. If you cop that Corky, they might try and count on, going to Butters. I'll have to look back at round 12 when they previously played at Adelaide Oval. Let's have a quick squeeze and see, just through fan footy, if Chincotta played on him. Where are we? Archive. Round 12. So Chincotta would have been playing then. And was he tagged? Yes, he was. He was tagged by Chincotta. So I expect that to happen again for this coming round, which is going to be annoying. So maybe I bypass Butters and go for someone else. I think a lot of teams will probably put the VC on him, just naturally being the first game up. If you want it to be different, you can put it on Rosie if you wanted to, but he scored the 108 last time. He didn't play in that game in round 12. Last time he's played was round 18, 2023. He scored the 108, 91, and a 54 before that. But Rosie's been in some half-decent form. Wouldn't say it's, apart from one score there of 168, really hasn't had any recent, half-decent VC or C scores. 111, 103, 168, 105, and a 113. So probably wouldn't go for that either. Walshy, I spoke about him, a little bit underdone, copped a knock. So I wouldn't feel confident in that. If you've got Cripps, potentially. North up against Geelong. Could you go for Sheasel as a bit of an outsider? You could. Where's it at? Bluntstone Arena. So Sheasel's actually had a pretty decent run of games. He scored a ton in every single game dating back to round 10, apart from round 18, where he scored the 75. But he's had scores of 117, 119, 129, 120, 117, 103, 141, that's 75, then a 138 on the weekend. So if you wanted a bit of a pod VC, I definitely recommend She's Nuts. Wouldn't have confidence in going for McKercher, but he'd definitely be a pod, of course. Let's just have a look quickly at DFS Australia as well to check out any sort of matchup exploitations with defence v position. So for Geelong, they give up, they're pretty restrictive actually, general defenders and designated kickers in their past 5 games. So maybe not Shees off the back of that. Next game, Gold Coast up against the Lions. So yeah, you could probably punt the VC on Flanders, considering that he has had an extreme run of form, hasn't scored below 100, so it gives you a bit of security there. Scored the 128 back in round 8 when they last met this season, so don't mind that as a bit of a flyer. If you, especially in head-to-head leagues and stuff, if you wanted to go contrarian and go a bit different. For the Lions, there's obviously Neil. I don't think Gold Coast will try and tag. Dunkley's another one as well. So those are your options there. Next game, St Kilda up against Essendon. If you want to go for Steele, I wouldn't trust him though. For the Dons, Merritt potentially. So looking at the Saints, they have a positive correlation to opposition inside mids, which is the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's like the 6th best side that give away points to opposition inside mids. So maybe not Zeret. I don't think Winhager's fit enough yet to be tagging, but unless they use someone else as well, like I said, Ross or someone. Outside of that game, the next one is Melbourne and the Giants. Don't think there's anyone you'd have confidence in at either side. There is Tom Green. He's projected strangely for a 129. So this is being played at the G as well. Scored in his past 3 against the Ds. 128, 115 and 64. Hasn't really had a captaincy score since round 15 when he scored the 153 against Sydney. And then prior to that, his next biggest score was 116 against Essendon. So his big scores have been few and far between. So I probably wouldn't put a bit of confidence in Tom Green, albeit, of course, look at the stats sheet for Freo and Melbourne, and you'll see that Melbourne's midfield got absolutely slammed. And obviously with Sarong and Brayshaw scoring well, maybe does suggest that, maybe there is reason to put the captaincy or at least the VC. I'll probably have a bit more confidence with the VC as a bit of a flyer on Tom Green, just because he would be a pod if you wanted to do that. But Gawn should be back, so that will definitely help their midfield brigade. Next up, we have Freo up against West Coast. So Sarong, potentially. What did he score last time? 117 back in round 6. Prior to that, 97 and a 146. So I don't mind that. The game after that, Collingwood against Richmond. Could you go Dacos? Just with West Coast as well against Freo. They're giving away the second most points to inside mids, so don't mind that. Recent scores from opposition inside mids. Jack Steele on the weekend, 118. Lockie Neal, 143. Dunkley, 103. McCluggage, 102. Rivers, 143. So a bit of a mixed bag there, but yeah, definitely an option, Sarong. But yeah, Pies up against Richmond. Could you go for Dacos? I don't want to touch anything Pies related at the moment. I think, they need to win for their own sanity, I think, against Richmond, who actually performed pretty well against Port to their own credit. Nick Dacos hasn't played the Tigers since round 3 in 2023 when he scored 109, and prior to that, scored an 80. If Jack Graham's back for a bit of a tagging role, they might use him. But as I said, Dacos, his previous 3 weeks have been 92, 89, and a 106. Prior to that, though, his scores were good, 116, 129, had a down game, albeit injured, and subbed against the Ds round 13 with a 64, 156, prior to that, 130, 105, 147, 150, 128, 133, and so on and so forth. So he's just out of form, much like the Pies. So I probably wouldn't have confidence, especially not with the C on him. Sydney against the Dogs, you could go for a Bont. I think Bont will probably be my captain. Heaney's another option as well. Goulden, if you've got him. I think Bont might be the C. Just because of the security that provides. His past 3 games against the Swans, his most recent being round 11, this season scored 135. Prior to that, 131 and a 108. So do really like the look of Bont. He's got that, again, good job security. Not job security, the scoring security blanket that almost he provides, because his lowest score for the season was, these were his 3 lowest scores, 73, which was back in round 5, 93 back in round 10 against the Giants, and the 73 was against the Dons, and then a 99 back in round 13 against the Lions. Every other score from his recent games, dating back to round 8, get this, 142, 135, 135, 186, 162, 157, 106, 108, and a 122 against the Cats on the weekend. So I do really like the look of him. Good recent form against them, 135. Do they use a James Jordan? Who knows if they do. Actually, let's go back and have a look, just via fan footy. Did anyone actually try and tag him back in round 11? Let's have a quick squiz. I don't know if anyone would have. Just because he's such a hard player to tag, unless you're a tall defender-esque like a Chincotta. Now, no, they tagged Treloar, believe it or not, with James Jordan. So Jordan's not the sort of player that can go with Bont, I don't think, in weight division or height. James Jordan being 187 centimetres, 82 kilos. So, yeah, I think, considering the Swans won last time, they might try and go with the same run with roll with Treloar, who was in some decent form on the weekend, back in the team from injury. So I do really like Bont. Goes without saying there. And the last game, Adelaide up against the Hawks. Don't know if you go for any on either side, really. Yeah. Could you go for Ryan, potentially Luke Ryan against West Coast? That's the other sort of, I guess, option. West Coast they've got a negative correlation to opposition designated kickers. Positive, they give away the third most to opposition general defenders and the third most to opposition wing defenders. So if you wanted to go down that route, potentially. But outside of that, I think those are pretty much the... Oh, and you could go for English as well. 122 is his projection up against Sydney this coming round. And the Swans have been... they've actually given up the least amount of points to opposition rucks. So probably not. So I don't know what Supercoach Gold is trying to suggest here. But yeah, wouldn't be going with Tim English. I know he played well, but it was up against pretty much a mannequin in the ruck with Sam de Koning as a part-time ruckman. So yeah, up against Grundy, I wouldn't be filled with confidence at all. Could you go for Caldwell against St Kilda? That's a bit of an outsider as well. 99 was just back in round 3, 85 prior to that, and a 114. So maybe. He's had his previous 5 scores, 115, 127, 134, 110, and a 100. His previous 5 games for the season. That's virtually, and I don't think you'd have confidence in a Maxi Gawn against Briggs, who's, as we know, a bustling ruckman. So actually the Giants, they do give away a bit of a positive correlation to opposition rucks, but nothing too major actually. So Briggs has tightened things up across the recent weeks. So that's pretty much it, ladies and gents. That's how we're looking. In terms of my own VC and C, I'll probably go for Bont as my C, late in the round, second last game. And VC, I don't know, do we go for a Butters just because, you know, the crowd will, and we don't want to miss out on a potential big score? Or do we just go left field? Like, is this the round where we try and go left field? It's the last, as I said, last round of the home and away Supercoach season before final start next round, after round 20, in round 21, obviously. Do we go left field? Do we go for a Flanders, potentially? I am feeling like awfully tempted to go just a bit outside of things. We could go for Sarong as well. Like, if he has really reclaimed his form, I know it's been only one game, but against West Coast, do they tag? Potentially not. Under Schofield as well, they're playing as many young players as they can until the end of the season. Do they even go down the tagging route? Probably not. So, yeah, there's a couple of options there. Probably I'd try the VC on a Sarong or Flanders. But Butters is obviously another obvious one as well. And Bont, I think I will stick the El Capitano armband on. That's virtually it, ladies and gents, in terms of the way things structure up. Hopefully Gawny's back. Knock on wood. Jackson's totally fine. Caldwell's fine. And yeah, it means that, we'll be right to go, and only 2 more weeks before we get Rankin back. Hopefully we don't really need to use him. It's a funny thing because obviously brought Rankin in to loophole with Charlie Curnow. Would have been helpful over the previous couple of weeks where Charles has been down on form. But yeah, I'm just thankful with the way things are going at the moment because it could be way, way worse. And there's been other teams with no trades left, and they've had to gobble, either donuts or rookie scores or, so on and so forth. So, could definitely be worse. That's always this thing to say and give you a bit of perspective. And for those people that have not yet seen, I have started up my own separate, of course, Nuffy Carlton channel. As you can see here, it is Blue Baggers Edge, just keeping that Edge name, the Edge branding, of course, which links back to my own business as well, that is called Creative Edge Films. But of course, if you haven't checked this out, feel free to do so, especially if you're a Baggers man, where I go through and review and preview every single game for the remainder of the season. And we'll be starting to get some guests on as well, which I'm hoping to get Janeth, of course, from Third Man Up, and does some absolutely fantastic work on the Sword Play podcast with DR. So yeah, keen to get him on, along with a few others as well. So give us a sub, all that sort of stuff if you can. Your support is absolutely fantastic and would be much appreciated. But outside of that, ladies and gents, thank you as always for tuning in, and really do appreciate your patronage, viewership, listenership, of course. If you are tuning in via YouTube, of course, feel free to give us a like, give us a sub, comment down below how you went on the weekend, and if you have any trades left and what you're looking to do heading into round 20 and beyond to the SuperCoach Finals Series. And of course, if you are tuning in via the audio side of things on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, feel free to give us a rating as well. We really do appreciate that and all the support that you can give us. Any feedback, suggestions, it is, of course, taken on board. So outside of that, ladies and gents, we really do appreciate you tuning in. Make sure to tune in on Tuesday when we will be dropping our weekly, as we always do, weekly podcast and vodcast as a bit of a review of round 19 and a bit of a preview for round 20, of course. So with that, we'll see you next time. Cheers.